In this episode of Let's Get Inside, we'll delve into why intelligent children often experience loneliness and face challenges in adulthood. This audio comes with subtitles, allowing you to follow along at your own pace and fully grasp the concepts discussed. Why do so many bright children grow up feeling trapped, detached, and utterly alone? They were expected to excel ahead of their peers, praised, rewarded, and assured of a bright future. Yet, somewhere along the way, that promise turned into pressure, and that praise became a confinement. Now, many of those once exceptional children struggle as adults. They lack motivation, feel socially inept, and find it hard to initiate tasks, see them through, or connect with others. Worst of all, they can't explain why, because outwardly everything seems fine. They remain sharp and capable, but inside, there's a persistent sense of isolation, as if life is happening to others while they merely observe. It turns out there's a reason for this. Intelligent children often build their entire identity around being smart. When this happens, the very trait that made them feel special as children becomes the exact thing that confines them as adults. Let's discuss why this occurs and, more importantly, how to address it. This isn't about failure. It's about a survival strategy that ceased to be effective. Understanding how you arrived here can help you find a way out. When we're young, our identity is typically simple. Children focus on one or two traits to build their sense of self. For example, a child might identify as someone who enjoys a particular hobby or food. It's one-dimensional, but that's normal. Identity starts straightforward, based on interests or labels. One of the most potent labels a child can receive is "you're smart." This label sticks, reinforced by teachers, parents, and peers, becoming a core part of self-perception. For a while, it feels incredible. Being smart as a child brings praise, attention, and an easier life. You don't have to study as hard as others. You grasp things quickly and stand out. However, there's a hidden cost. When praised for being smart, the praise is usually for effortless success. You were commended for solving problems quickly, getting top grades without trying, and understanding things immediately. Over time, you internalize a dangerous belief. If I'm smart, things should come easily to me. This belief subtly undermines everything as you grow older. The moment something isn't easy, when you struggle, fail, or don't understand something right away, it doesn't feel like a normal challenge. It feels like a threat to your identity. You tell yourself, if I'm to be smart, why am I struggling? Instead of embracing difficulty, you start avoiding it. You don't raise your hand unless you're sure of the answer. You don't play games unless you know you'll win. You avoid pursuing things you might love because they might expose you as someone who isn't as smart as you seem. Slowly, your life starts too narrow. You only do what you're already good at, sticking to familiar territory to protect your image as the perfect smart kid instead of trying new things. This is the crux of the issue. While everyone else is out there experimenting, trying, failing, and developing, you're locked inside a shrinking comfort zone. The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to leave. At some point, you realize you've built your entire identity on something that now feels fragile. You can't afford to fail, look stupid, or threaten what you've built your whole identity on. So, you stall, and that's when the isolation starts to set in. When you stop growing, you also stop connecting. Connection comes from shared activities, being on a team, going through awkward stages together, or working hard towards something. If you start opting out of these things, removing yourself from situations where others bond, you miss the moments that create real friendships and connections. You don't join the club because you're afraid you'll be bad at it. You don't try the sport because it's unfamiliar. You avoid group projects because they frustrate you. Without realizing it, you start stepping out of the flow of social life. Yet, you still crave connection. So, what do? You lean on what you know, your intelligence. You try to understand people instead of relating to them. You analyze, observe, and run simulations in your head. This leads to something called cognitive empathy, where you can logically understand what others feel but don't emotionally engage with them. It works to a point. You can navigate conversations, keep up socially, and even seem charismatic on the surface. But underneath, you're exhausted because instead of just being with people, you're calculating, constantly thinking about what to say, how to respond, and what they might be thinking. Now, socializing becomes something you have to be good at, and to avoid failing at it, you start avoiding it. This is where the loneliness deepens. But you're smart, right? You should be able to figure this out. So, you start applying logic to emotional problems, trying to fix your self-esteem with rationality. You write out arguments to convince yourself you're fine, analyzing your own behavior to death. None of it helps because intelligence wasn't designed to fix emotional pain. It's not a tool for self-worth. It's a tool for solving external problems. When you try to use it to feel okay inside, it just keeps looping because there's no intellectual answer to the question, am I enough? That question can only be answered emotionally. And for smart kids, emotional growth is often the one thing that got left behind. When the emotional pain becomes too sharp, when the loneliness starts to feel unbearable, that's when the ego steps in and forms one final defense. You tell yourself, I'm just different from other people. I don't relate because they're not as smart. I'm too deep for surface-level friendships. Now, instead of admitting that you're lonely, you convince yourself that you're above everyone, else not because you actually believe it, but because it hurts less than admitting you feel left out. This is what we call defensive arrogance, and it's one of the most isolating patterns you can fall into. It creates a wall between you and everyone else. Even when you want connection, the wall doesn't let you reach for it because connection requires humility, presence, and vulnerability. So, how do we fix this? The first step, and this is non-negotiable, is to stop identifying as the smart kid. You have to let that identity go, not because being intelligent is bad, but because basing your self-worth on it is toxic. When your value is tied to how easy you succeed, you will do everything in your power to avoid effort, failure, and situations that might prove you're not exceptional. You'll sabotage progress just to protect the illusion, and eventually, that illusion will collapse. The fix is to build a new identity, not around being smart, but around being willing to grow. You stop asking what will make me look intelligent, and start asking what will help me move forward. You stop protecting your pride and start embracing discomfort. You let yourself try things and be bad at them. You start showing up not to win, but to participate. Yeah, it's awkward, uncomfortable, and feels like a step backward, but it's not. It's the first real step toward becoming whole. The old identity told you that your value came from being special. The new one reminds you that your value comes from being human. Being human means you're allowed to be uncertain, grow slowly, feel lost, and not know what the hell you're doing half the time. But the only way forward is to take action anyway, not perfect action, not clever action, just honest, imperfect, human steps forward. So, if you're someone who feels stuck, numb, or chronically disconnected, if you've spent your whole life trying to be the smartest person in the room and now don't know how to be anything else, this is where you begin. You let go of the story. You stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be real, because you don't need to be the smartest person in the room to belong in it. You just need to be someone willing to show up, even when it's hard, messy, or unfamiliar. If you can do that, if you can stop clinging to the version of yourself that needs to be above it all, you'll start to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Connection. Not because you earned it or deserved it, but because you were, finally, willing to step down from the pedestal and into the world where the rest of the people live. It turns out that world isn't so bad. In fact, it's the only place where you can truly be seen. More importantly, it's the only place where you can finally feel at home. If any part of this resonated with you, if you recognize yourself in these patterns or felt something click that you haven't quite been able to put into words before, leave a comment and let me know what stood out. Chances are, you're not the only one who feels this way. Sometimes, naming the pattern is the first real step to breaking it.